Welcome to the Weekly Transit, a podcast exploring the intersection of Western astrology and Jungian psychology. Astrology is a language that communicates how the planets and stars influence life on Earth, while psychology helps us navigate both conscious and unconscious experiences. Together, these tools offer the potential for self-understanding, growth, and transformation. Join astrologer Scott Tajarian and me, psychotherapist Gabriela Durso, as we dive into the cosmic forecast each week.
Welcome to the Weekly Transit. This week is the week of January 8th through the 14th, the second week of 2024. In this video, we'll be discussing 7 major transits for the week, which is highlighted by the new moon in Capricorn and Mercury returning to Capricorn, transiting into Capricorn from Sagittarius. So welcome, Gabriela, and welcome, audience. Yes. The first transit of the week is Mercury, the messenger of the gods, guide of souls to the underworld, the planet of consciousness, communication, coordination, transiting still in its retrograde shadow through Sagittarius. As it transits through Sagittarius, it forms a square with Neptune, the god of fresh water and the sea, the planet of illusion, deception, compassion, and intuition in the mutable water sign symbolized by the fish and ruled by Neptune, Pisces. This transit is occurring from Sunday, January 7th until Wednesday, January 10th. It makes an exact square, Mercury and Neptune, the planet of the conscious, the planet of the unconscious, on Monday, January 8th. And the interesting thing about this transit is this is the third time that this transit is occurring with Mercury and Neptune since the end of November. They first aligned in this exact same way in a square at around 24 degrees. Right now it's at 25 degrees, but that was November 26th to the 28th. That is when Mercury was direct and Neptune was retrograde. The last time was December 26th to the 28th when Mercury was retrograde and Neptune was direct. And now January 7th to the 10th, Mercury and Neptune are both direct. So
Interesting.
Yes. So this is the third time around. And the way that I look at this transit is, first of all, Mercury, the planet of consciousness, in Sagittarius, the sign of truth, honesty, exploration. There have maybe been some fiery conversations, more so than normal in your life, perhaps, with Mercury transiting through Sagittarius. It's like the truth is coming out and the truth has maybe hurt. And this was something, again, that you were already experiencing in November and late November, late December with the alignment with Neptune, which is compassion. So how can we speak our truth while still be compassionate to those that we're sharing our truth to? That's the challenge. There also may be a lack of clarity with regards to how you're viewing the future. You know, the Sagittarius energy is about looking beyond the here and now. It's the archer. The archer is pulling back and thinking about where they want the arrow to go, somewhere beyond here. And so with Neptune squaring Mercury, it may be like shooting an arrow through the fog. So you really have to double down on faith. You may not be able to see where it is you're going. You may even be uncertain about what it is you want. But when you go within yourself, what is the feeling that you want to have? And do you have the faith to make the choices or say the things that you want to say in order to manifest your future hopes and dreams into reality?
This reminds me of when you're on an airplane, if you have the window seat, which I usually try to, and that experience of flying through the clouds where there's this like temporary blindness almost. And when you're in it, you know that you'll come out of it, but when you're in that sort of temporary state of like you're disabled in some way from being able to see what's in front of you or what's occurring, and you know you'll come out of it, but there's this sort of anticipation or, whatever comes up for you, I think in that fog is really important to look at. Like you're saying, do you have faith or do you have fear? Do you have anxiety? And there's no right or wrong answer. Maybe it's a mix of several different emotions that are coming up for you, but that can give you a lot of information about your experience, how you experience uncertainty.
What do you think that means? Why is that important? Understanding how you experience uncertainty.
I would say it's giving insight into what sort of default program you're running. Like you mentioned in the last episode, you compared us all to iPhones, and we have certain settings and, programs, apps that we've downloaded that we've agreed to work with, energetically speaking. And I think those moments of cloudiness when you're going through the fog is when you have an opportunity to gain greater awareness about what kind of default settings that are running kind of behind the scenes. It's kind of like how your relationship is with silence as well. And what comes up for you in that moment can also give you insight into your unconscious. That sort of default programming also represents your unconscious belief systems. And it's a really powerful way to work with yourself, working with what comes up for you in silence or in moments of confusion. One way to do that is through meditation, but also just allowing more silence in your daily life. I had a Reiki client once who I worked with for several years. This individual would come weekly, and we had really powerful sessions, and a lot was shifting for them. And I challenged them at one point to practice coming to our session and leaving our session to not have on any music or anything in the car. And that ended up being such a profound, it gave us so much insight into what was going on for this individual. And of course, these themes came up in the Reiki work as well, but it gave them insight coming into the exchange, like what was most present for them. And this particular individual had a really hard time with silence and had a hard time allowing something to emerge from the silence. So what emerges from the silence, what emerges from this foggy Neptunian energy is giving you information, giving you data to work with. Like sometimes it's really helpful to go to therapy and to talk about what's going on. And other times we have to just receive from ourselves. And there's a dialogue that needs to happen between you and you. It's not always the answer to talk to another person. I think ideally a mix of both can be really healing. But it sounds to me like there's an invitation in this particular transit to work on that communication with yourself.
100%. For sure. How can you be honest with yourself and still be compassionate?
Mm-hmm. I think that's how you practice it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because you don't really know how things are received from the other person's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But you know how things are received through yourself, through your own communication.
Totally.
If you can tap into it, you know if your thoughts feel good or bad.
So maybe this transit, if you go back and do you remember what was going on with you November 26th to the 28th and December 26th to the 28th? I like to go back and look at my text messages and if I'd taken any photographs or maybe I've done a social media post or something like that. It's through that helps me remember what was going on with myself. But I really like the idea of driving in silence, and I've done that before. I mean, I've driven 6-7 hours on the road with no phone calls, no music, no radio, nothing. And it is powerful. You get deep with yourself, especially when you're on the road too. There's a lot happening. Your surroundings are moving and changing. Maybe that's what this is too. It's like going on a long drive by yourself in silence, because Mercury's in Sagittarius, and that's travel. So I like the plane analogy too, and flying in through the clouds, not being able to see anything. That is, like you were saying, it's your inner process. You're learning about your inner process, your default setting. What are the voices that are coming up in your head? Is kind of like the plane flying on autopilot. Where do you end up going?
Yeah, or cruise control in your car. Yeah.
Yeah, where do you end up? Thank you, Gabriella.
Yeah, thank you.
The second transit of the week is the sun, the giver of light, life, and vitality, transiting through the cardinal earth sign, symbolized by the goat, Capricorn, forming a positive or supportive trine with Uranus, the primordial sky god, the planet of revolution, rebellion, innovation, independence, and the unexpected, which is still transiting retrograde. It's the last planet that is transiting retrograde. Uranus is in the fixed earth sign symbolized by the bull, Taurus. This transit is occurring from January 8th, Monday, until Thursday, January 11th, with the exact trine occurring on Tuesday, January 9th. That's the day when this may feel most powerful to you. So the sun bringing that vitality to Capricorn, which is the sign of responsibility, work, achievement, authority. Uranus creating the revolution to Taurus, which is the sign of self-worth, values, material security. So something is occurring here with regards to your goals and ambitions and your values, your self-worth. Is there something that you need to change, radically change or shift about your goals and ambitions based on your self-worth and your values? Maybe you had certain goals in 2023, and now you're here in the beginning of 2024, and you're like, you know what, my values have shifted, and so my goals, my ambitions need to shift as well. So this is about being open to a radical shift or change in terms of the trajectory of what it is you're working to achieve. And it's interesting that this is occurring simultaneous to Mercury in Sagittarius squaring Neptune in Pisces. It's like as you're having this very honest conversation, difficult, honest conversation with yourself, you're starting to realize that my values are maybe different than what I thought they were. And my goals and ambitions now need to shift because my autopilot is actually headed in the wrong direction. And I need to course correct.
And maybe it was the right direction for the time being, but you need to consciously turn in a different direction.
Exactly.
Yeah. This Uranus energy is making me think a little bit of dream work and doing the work to integrate the unconscious parts into our conscious awareness. And I had a wonderful Jungian analyst that I worked with and we did a lot of dream work together. And she would always ask me after I'd shared a dream if there was anything in particular that surprised me about the dream. And that really stuck with me. And she explained to me that the element of surprise is really important because that's the moment where what you're unconscious of, like the material that has previously been suppressed in some way by your ego, essentially. Remember, the ego is the gatekeeper of what can come from the unconscious into the conscious. So that moment of surprise is indicating what material has actually moved through and made it to the other side, made it into consciousness. And that's really the lesson of the dream, is the surprise. And I think this Uranus energy, I think of a lightning bolt or, this electrical sort of energy, and it's surprising. There's something about it. It's a flash of insight or information. And it doesn't necessarily mean surprises are not always pleasant. Some people don't even like surprises at all, even like a surprise party or something. So maybe thinking about considering any time you feel surprised during this particular transit and giving some extra time and attention to whatever that material is to really pay attention and integrate it.
I love that.
It's helped me a lot.
Uranus is the wake-up call.
Yeah.
It's like, and that's what a surprise is. It, in a sense, it's like a wake-up call. Like this was a wake-up call. It's like dating myself back to before cell phones, but like you'd stay in a hotel and you would call the front desk and say, I need a wake-up call for 7 a.m. And at 7 a.m., they call your room. And those old telephones in the hotels had a really like loud ring to them.
It's a rude wake-up call.
It's a rude awakening. Yeah, it never feels
Yeah.
good. 5 a.m., 6 a.m., the room's dark. You're like, what? Oh my God. Okay. So Uranus is creating that wake-up call. And
so it's up to us to allow ourselves to be woken up to the best of our ability.
And then so you have Mercury in Sagittarius, the sign of honesty, squaring Neptune, the planet of dreams, in Pisces, the sign of dreams. And then Uranus, the wake-up call, forming a trine with the sun, the identity. It's like you're having this conversation with yourself, and through that conversation, it may be like you're awake, but the idea comes on and you're like, oh, this is what I want. This is what I like. It's different than what I was thinking before. It's not necessarily that you're asleep and then you wake up but it could be that too. I encourage anyone who has a key point or planet between 17 and 21 degrees in a earth sign, water sign, or fixed sign. So the earth signs are Capricorn, Taurus, and Virgo. The water signs are Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. And the fixed signs are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. These are the signs that Uranus is waking up right now. This is where the surprise is happening. So if you were born with, I always like to use Venus because it's like the easy example because it's relationships. If you were born with Venus between 17 and 21 degrees in Taurus or Cancer or Leo or Virgo or Scorpio or Capricorn or Pisces, you're getting a wake-up call to your relationships. It's the surprise to your relationships with this Uranus energy here. And it's been sitting here at 19 degrees for over a month because this is where the retrograde ends. So it's been there. By the time Uranus moves beyond 19 degrees, it's been there for 2-3 months.
So there's potential for a shakeup.
Yeah, absolutely. And these shakeups, you just have to go with the flow. When the earthquake comes and your house crumbles to the ground, what are you going to do? You got to just move on in life. You've got to just keep it on. There's no sense in trying to go back in time and to change anything. Well, maybe if I didn't live in this house, then if I lived in another house, then the house wouldn't have crumbled to the ground. But you can't change that. You can't change the past. So you have to just move forward. That's what Uranus is really urging us to do, is to move forward.
Well, I think first it's urging us to be present.
Yeah, for sure.
Because there's nothing like an earthquake to bring you into the present moment. If you're daydreaming or if you're thinking about the future, you're suddenly hyper aware of what's happening in the moment.
Yes.
So I think that's what allows you to move forward, is to be present first.
Love that. Our third transit for the week is Mars, the god of war, the planet of action, aggression, and conflict, transiting through Capricorn, the sign where Mars is exalted. So Mars is in a position of power as it transits through Capricorn. And as it does, it forms a sextile, which is a positive supportive aspect to Saturn, the god of wealth and time, the planet of restriction, responsibility, hard work, achievement, and authority, and the planetary ruler of Capricorn, the sign where Mars is transiting through. This is occurring from January 8th to the 11th. So that's Monday through Thursday, just as the sun forms that trine with Uranus. So this is really shaping up to be a power-packed, intense sort of week of shifting and manifesting. We began, as we talked about, Mercury in Sagittarius, aligning with Neptune in Pisces, then the sun in Capricorn aligning with Uranus in Taurus, and now Mars in Capricorn aligning with Saturn in Pisces. All three of these alignments are happening at basically the same time. Monday through Wednesday, Thursday, Sunday through Thursday, basically. So Mars is giving us that energy to take the steps. Mercury is bringing that awareness or that conversation with yourself and having an honest conversation with yourself. Uranus is bringing that awareness back to the present, in your being present in your current reality, as you were saying. And Mars is giving us the courage to take the necessary steps to bring your dreams into reality, to manifest what it is you want by doing what you want.
And would you say Saturn is giving us maybe the structure and the support to be willing to make the changes?
Yes. Saturn is giving that structure and support to our unconscious. It's helping us become more maybe conscious of our unconscious.
It's grounding us in some way.
It's grounding us into some reality. Mars is saying, let's go. And Saturn's saying, okay, if you want to go, then you need to be aware of your inner process and the steps that you need to take in order to achieve your goals and ambitions.
Saturn in Pisces kind of reminds me of, I had this realization once, and I don't know if this was actually my realization or if I heard this from someone else. Has that ever happened to you where suddenly you just have information and you're not quite sure where it came from?
Totally.
But I had this awareness like in the last couple years that you have the ocean, right? Which seems like this vast, endless body of energy. And I had this realization that there is earth beneath the water. That there's that it's even though that sounds really obvious.
Yeah, right.
Right? But that there is matter that is actually supporting
Holding
the water.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of what, like, I have this image coming to me as you're talking about this, like Saturn is the ocean floor itself and Pisces is the water.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So in some ways it seems like it's Saturn, the planet of reality in the sign of the unconscious. And I know we've said before, like, oh, that's uncomfortable and that's strange in some way. But if you look at the ocean and the ocean floor, you can sort of start to understand how they need each other.
How does the ocean, why does the floor need the ocean though?
Well, it reminds me of when you water a plant and the soil is really dry and cracked and it needs the moisture from the water.
Yes.
And so the earth needs the water to moisturize it and to soften it.
Yes.
And then the water needs the earth to provide the form for the water.
Right. Can you imagine if there was no water on Earth? Like what? Like when you look at like the planet of Earth.
First of all, we wouldn't be here.
I know, obviously, yeah. But like when you look at like, it's like this blue planet, Earth. Is. You know, if there was no water, it would just be like this floating rock with like these giant holes and crevices in it. Because like, if you just think about how deep the ocean goes, I think it would look really weird.
It would be a completely different place.
Like shaving a cat, you know? It's just like
like a hairless cat.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You take like a really furry cat and you just shave it. Completely bare. That's what the earth would look like without water to me.
Okay, this took a weird turn.
Yes. We've got so that was the third transit. And I want to talk about these next two transits. And then I want to talk about the new moon.
Okay.
So because these next two transits are occurring kind of concurrently to these other two transits, these other three transits that we're talking about. It's occurring concurrently to these other three transits, give or take a day. You got Venus, the goddess of love, the goddess of beauty, the planet of relationships in the mutable fire sign, Sagittarius. So transiting along with Mercury, they're both in Sagittarius, Venus and Mercury. Venus transiting through Sagittarius is forming a trine, which is a positive supportive aspect with Chiron, the wound, and the ancient wisdom that is unlocked through healing that wound in the cardinal fire sign symbolized by the ram Aries. This transit occurs from January 9th to the 12th. So this is Tuesday to Friday. It's most strongly felt. The exact connection happens on Thursday, January 11th. That's the same day as the new moon in Capricorn. So we're piecing this all together. Mercury in Sagittarius, forming a square to Neptune in Pisces, having that difficult, honest conversation with yourself, as the sun in Capricorn forms a trine with Uranus in Taurus, where we are receiving the wake-up call to our reality, our goals, our ambitions, our self-worth and values. Mars in Capricorn forming a sextile with Saturn in Pisces, which is driving us to manifest our goals and ambitions, to bring our dreams into reality, to be the ocean floor that's holding the ocean while the ocean nurtures the earth. Venus in Sagittarius forming a trine to Chiron in the same time period is urging us to be honest about our fears in our relationships. What are your greatest insecurities in your close personal relationships? How can you be more honest with yourself and your partners in order to overcome these fears and hopefully grow beyond them in some way? To strive to a future where you feel more secure and confident and courageous in the expression of your senses and your values. Because it can be difficult in relationships. You fall in love with somebody, whether it's a friend, you fall in love with a friend. It doesn't have to be like a romantic sexual thing, or it could be a business partner. You have love for them. And when it starts, there is this sort of romantic period, the honeymoon phase, where all the values are kind of just thrown in the back because there's obviously a connection. We feel something for each other. But then over time, it sort of evolves or devolves into fading into that reality. And with Mars and the Sun in Capricorn, Uranus in Taurus, Jupiter's also in Taurus, we have these planets in earth signs. It's sort of grounding us into the reality where you're somewhat out of the bliss of things and you realize that maybe my values don't align with the values of the individual that I'm in relationship with. And I'm afraid to share those values because I may offend the person I'm with and then they're not going to want to be with me. I'm afraid. But I'm also afraid to continue down this path because I really recognize that the values are in different places. And so how do we have that forthright, honest conversation to face our fears and to set ourselves free? Not necessarily to end the relationship, but to be more accepting of how the other is feeling in terms of their values and allowing them to be free to live from that foundation of whatever it is they value.
And a piece of this too, whenever you talk about Chiron or the wound, I think about the wisdom that comes from the wound. So it's not that the wound ever completely goes away. Maybe it closes and there's some scar tissue, but there's always the trace of the wound. When you just look at, the body's healing process, when you get injured, there's always like a memory, a body memory there. So I think too, it's about identifying what is the wisdom that you've gained through that wound. And that's the part that can help give meaning to the whole process.
Yeah, what are you learning from this? What is the wisdom that you are receiving from the experience of the wound?
Right.
I saw this really inspiring story recently about this young college football player who, I just think about this because of all the Sagittarius energy, and Sagittarius is about being able to speak your truth. And then thinking about the Chiron, the wound. When this young man, he has a very severe stuttering issue. And he didn't start stuttering until he was 6 or 7 years old, which was interesting to me because that's the Saturn squaring Saturn time period.
Yes.
His name's Andre Sam. He's plays for LSU, Louisiana State University. And when he was 6 years old, his dad died. I'm not really sure how his dad died, but he died when he was 6 years old. And I think literally 3 weeks later, his grandpa died.
Wow.
And it was incredibly traumatic, obviously. And he started stuttering after that.
Wow.
And then when he was a senior in high school, his older brother, who was playing football at McNeese State, was a senior there, was shot and killed.
Oh my goodness.
And this young man ended up following his deceased brother to McNeese State. Didn't have any scholarship offers. Nobody was interested in him playing football. So he walked on there. They gave him a scholarship. After a couple of years, he got noticed by a bigger school, Marshall, and they brought him in. He played there for a year. And then his coach at Marshall, his defensive coordinator, went on to another school. So he decided to transfer again and ended up going to LSU, which is like an elite college.
What an incredible story.
Yes. And so
what happened with the stuttering?
He's still stuttering. I mean,
He
you can tell he's working really hard at trying not to stutter, but it's still very prevalent with him. And it's inspiring because his teammates are very patient with him. You know, everyone is so supportive and encouraging of him. And you know, I watched an interview with him, and he was very open about how difficult his upbringing was, not only because of all the trauma he experienced, but because of, you know, what it's like to grow up with a stutter and people have trouble accepting you. You know, I think the wisdom of what he has learned through this experience as he's gone from school to school to school, is just belief in himself. That nobody wanted me out of high school, but that didn't mean that I didn't believe in myself that I could go play college football. And he believed in himself and worked hard, and he made it to one of the most elite college football schools. And Sagittarius is about belief. It's about belief in yourself, belief in connecting to a higher power, that it doesn't matter what other people say. I know it's possible because I have a connection to God, to the universe. And Chiron, ironically enough, the story of Chiron was transformed into the constellation of Sagittarius. So this is a very special aspect occurring here between Venus and Chiron. So hopefully there's ultimately a lot of healing that is occurring through this alignment with Venus and Chiron, as all these other planets are aligning with each other. Mercury and Neptune, healing the mind. Saturn and Mars, healing self-confidence in achieving your goals. The Sun and Uranus, being willing to energize that independent side of yourself that says, I'm ready for that revolution. Whatever it is, I'm going to be a part of it. And then Venus and Chiron, through these other transits, are hopefully helping you heal your senses, your values, what you bring to relationships, and what you want to receive from your partners, and ultimately healing your partnerships.
It's interesting you're talking about belief systems, and I'm thinking about the way that belief systems can be conscious and unconscious, like how we have these default programs running behind the scenes that are belief systems that we might not even be aware that we hold, that could be passed down, that could be ancestral, familial belief systems that are stored actually, you know, in our kind of psychic space. But we can have, of course, conscious belief systems too, that could be at odds with one another. Like if you have a conscious belief system about something, but that's not how things are really showing up in your reality, it might indicate that there's a conflict, that actually what you think you believe is not in alignment with maybe what's going on in your unconscious. So that's something interesting to consider during this transit, because it seems like there's an opportunity for integration or alignment or awareness around maybe those parts that are or are not congruent with one another. And I'm also thinking about this man, the story of his stuttering, and how anytime there is trauma to the throat, like I would consider the stuttering to be an embodiment of some sort of emotional trauma or psychic trauma that occurred with these losses. It indicates to me that there is something out of alignment between the head and the heart. Because in my Reiki work, anytime there was a block in the throat, there was some way that the head and heart aren't communicating to one another. And so it gets activated and trapped in the throat because that's the center of those particular chakras. So I wonder for him, in his particular story, what that's about.
Yes.
Like a belief system that's not aligned with what his heart knows to be true. And the heart is where we grieve. The lungs, the heart. I think the large intestines as well are all connected to grief. So something going on for him around the mind having a conflict with the grief process, perhaps. Unable to allow the grief, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
In some way.
Yes. I just saw it as like not feeling safe to speak.
Absolutely,
because,
that too.
I mean, who knows, but it's like losing two prominent male figures at such a young age. Maybe that's what...
It created some restriction.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Not feeling safe or protected or...
Absolutely. So I trained several years ago as an end-of-life doula, and the instructor for the class, he was the one who started the whole program. I learned from him towards the beginning of the start of the organization, which is called the International End-of-Life Doula Association, if anyone's interested in looking this up. And his name is Henry Fusco Weiss. And he described experiences of being bedside as people were dying. Several of his clients were dying. And it was his experience that when the soul leaves the body, that it happens through the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to consider how he had these experiences with death. And as part of that, part of him had to die as well, his innocence, a part of his child self, perhaps. And in the process of the necessity for that part of him to die, it got blocked in some way in the throat. It was unable to fully die.
Yes.
That's another interpretation.
Right. Yes, that makes sense. Wow. It's the breath.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to release.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's an opportunity for something potent here to move through.
Oh, yeah.
To be cleared.
I think there's a lot of clearing happening leading up to this new moon. And the fifth transit is the sun, again, in Capricorn, forming a square with the North Node in Aries. This is also an aspect that is going to be happening concurrently with the new moon in Capricorn. Because the new moon in Capricorn is at 20 degrees in Capricorn, and the North Node is at 20 degrees in Aries. These are both cardinal signs. Capricorn is earth, Aries is fire. It creates this friction. Fire scorches earth, earth extinguishes fire. This all builds up, though, to the new moon because the sun starts squaring the North Node on Tuesday and will continue squaring the North Node through Friday. So happening at the same time as all these other aspects that we've been talking about. But it's on Thursday, January 11th at 3:58 a.m. Pacific time is when the moon will pass the sun at 20 degrees in Capricorn. So the squaring between the sun and the North Node, it's like, what is the status of your self-confidence as an authority? It's like you're having these honest conversations with yourself that may be difficult, where you may really get into an argument in your own mind. You may find that you are at war in your own mind. And as you are experiencing that inner war within yourself, you're harnessing the courage to show yourself compassion, to be empathetic to the other voices in your head, because it's not just you talking to yourself. It's your friends, your family, your lovers, your coworkers. You have these conversations in your mind. Are you being compassionate and empathetic with them as well as yourself? As we move through this energy, we're really being called to step into our power as the authority, to face our fears and insecurities, and being willing to be authentic. An authority who is authentic, an authority who is honest and forthright and true. It's like, there's these phrases they say about these types of people, like they're a straight shooter. You know what you get with that person. They're not hiding. What you see is what you get. What you see is what you get. What you see is what you get. And they're not hiding behind anything. We're all being called out right now. We're being called out to be what you see is what you get. And wherever the chips may fall in my life, in my career, in my goals, my ambitions, my relationships, is where they fall. And I know that I'm going to be good because I'm being real. I'm being myself. So as we lead into that new moon, early Thursday morning Pacific time, 3:58 a.m., you really want to set your intentions to be authentic about what you want to achieve. Be authentic about what you want to achieve so that you can set your intentions to achieve what it is you truly want to achieve. What are your goals? What are your ambitions? Where do you want to be in 6 months when it's the full moon in Capricorn? Where do you want to be in 12 months when it's the next new moon in Capricorn? Set your goals, but set goals that are authentic to you. And of course, if you're curious to know how this new moon cycle is going to be affecting you directly, you can enroll in my moon cycle classes at theweeklytransit.com, where we will look at the house where the new moon is occurring for you and the planets in your astrological code that are aligning to the new moon, because those all offer colors or wrinkles in terms of goals and ambitions. It shifts the energy ever so slightly, and it's important to key in on those nuances so that you're setting intentions that are specific to you. But if you're unable to make the moon class, then my suggestion to you is to be very clear about what you want to accomplish, your goals and ambitions, and to set your intentions to be authentic in working to achieve those goals. Because the more authentic you are, the more motivated you are going to be to do the work.
Well, and the more you can choose goals in the first place that are authentic, the more you, like you're saying, will want to
do the work,
achieve them.
Yes, you'll want to achieve them. You'll be motivated to actually do the work.
Right.
Because you don't achieve a goal by just sitting around and waiting for, it to show up.
Unless your goal is surrender.
But that takes work.
Yes, under the surface, but it might look a lot like sitting around. I'm just throwing that out there.
Exactly. Maybe if you're sitting around because you're doing the inner work, it's still work.
Yeah, so that's true.
You still have to do something.
Well, I think this is interesting, and it's a really potent invitation during this time of year, because I think there's so much kind of societal programming or encouragement perhaps around having certain goals connected to weight loss or connected to money, or maybe, not to say that either of those are entirely superficial. Those can be really wonderful goals, but there's sort of like these default buckets, I think, that goals often fall into that are respected by others. So I appreciate the invitation to really think about what goals are authentic to you, because they could be goals that only affect your relationship with yourself or only affect your private life. They're not goals that you're necessarily going to get a compliment for out in the world because you lost 10 or 20 pounds. The goals don't necessarily need to interact with the outside world in any way. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But it's not how we're really kind of set up to think about goals, is for them to really be authentic.
No, it's you're like, well, look at what they're doing, or look at what they're doing. I want that.
Yeah, it's a lot of goals come from
your
comparison.
Yeah, exactly. You're basing your goals based on what you deem as other people being successful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that person's successful, so I want what they have. So that's my goal.
But it's what society deems as success.
Exactly. Totally.
Which is often a particular body type and a particular like financial place in the world. Mm-hmm. You know, a particular living situation, maybe a certain car, a certain, you know,
handbag, clothes,
the size of the diamond on your wedding band. I mean, all of these, like, are those really your goals? If they're authentically your goals and they're aligned with your soul versus your ego, then it's authentic for you.
And that's what's great about all this inner work with Neptune in Pisces and Saturn in Pisces is it's really, and the fact that Mars is aligning with Saturn and Mercury is aligning with Neptune is really pushing us to go within ourselves in order to define what is the root of my goals. Where do they come from? Do they come from within my soul? Are they true to my soul? Or is it because I'm insecure and so I'm putting my expectations of goals based on what other people that I deem as confident are achieving?
It's a really important practice, especially with this transit, this invitation, but just in terms of your own individuation process as well. This is really forcing you to, you know, you're walking through the woods and there are multiple paths to walk on. Which path do you walk on when there's no crowd?
Right.
When there's no one else in the woods? Where do you want to go?
Yes.
Versus if you're walking with the group, maybe you're swayed and you are going to follow the group. So this is a big deal.
Yes. The 6th transit is happening during the same period. It goes a little bit beyond, though. This is, again, Mars in Capricorn, forming a positive supportive trine with Jupiter, the god of thunder, lord of justice, the planet of luck and expansion, transiting through Taurus. So we briefly mentioned Jupiter and Taurus a little bit ago. As one of these planets in Earth signs, it's really grounding us into reality. This transit is occurring most strongly January 9th to the 13th. So Tuesday to Saturday. It forms an exact trine on Friday, January 12th. So right after the new moon. But this, again, is another frequency that is sort of like what you're talking about. Like, what do I value? That's Jupiter is expanding the energy of Taurus. And Taurus is about values, self-worth. If my self-worth is low, then my values are unclear. I'm basing my likes and dislikes based on what I think someone else thinks is cool because they, from my perception, have more confidence or self-worth than I do. So Mars is the planet of confidence and courage. It's giving us the courage to really go after what we want to achieve, but the alignment with Jupiter in Taurus is causing us to really ponder, is what I want to achieve something that I truly value? We all have a unique connection to God, the universe, whatever higher power you believe in, and you have a unique astrological code. You have a unique set of gifts. We're being called to become aware of those gifts, to value those gifts, and through valuing those gifts, motivating ourselves to do the work required to unwrap those gifts and cultivate those gifts and bring those gifts into reality so that we can be of true benefit to the people that we come into contact with. And you are no matter what. Whether you know what your gifts are or you're cultivating your gifts, you are of value to every person you come into contact with because you're giving them a clear reflection of themselves that they can only see through you. And so it might be a good time to really take a look at the people that you look up to. If you're somebody who doesn't feel like you have any real gifts, I don't have any talents, I'm not really good at this, that, or the next thing, or maybe what you want is because somebody else outside of you wants that, has that, and you see that as something with value, and so that's what you're going after, to look within. Like why is this person, why do they have such influence over me? Why do I admire them so much? What is it about them that I admire? What is about them that I value? Do I have those qualities within myself? And if so, how so?
I'm thinking about the way that social media and trends might be affecting this experience for people.
Tell me.
And for me in particular.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting to look at, if you're on Instagram, who are you following? Think about the language.
Yeah, exactly.
Who are you following?
Mm-hmm.
Who are you following? And do you really like those people? Or are you following them because they have a large following? I know for me, if I'm, bopping around and looking at different profiles, if I come across someone who has a large following, I feel more interested in following them.
Totally. You pay them more respect.
As a default.
Exactly.
Without taking the opportunity to really figure out if they align with my values.
Exactly.
I think it's the same way with, I shared a couple weeks ago, I have a background in the fashion industry. It's the same way with trends. You see this particular color enough, you start to think that you like it. Whether you do or don't, whether it looks good on you or not. I think that both of those experiences are obstacles to the individuation process as a default. Of course, you always have the opportunity to engage more mindfully and consciously, like with social media or with shopping, making purchases. But you have to approach it, I think, from that perspective of just because it's popular doesn't mean it's necessarily for me. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. And it's interesting to think about, how much can we really individuate when we don't have an example of what we value outside of us? I would say that's an obstacle. It's something to maybe reflect on. I don't have the perfect answer, but I'm just thinking of the way that we learn as children is by example. Your parents can say something to you, but what you are going to embody and actually take on is what they do, not necessarily what they say. So if there's any sort of a conflict between those two, you start to develop the traits that are what your parents actually do. Yeah. Their belief systems.
Monkey see, monkey do.
Monkey see, monkey do. So you're really giving so much power, like going back to Instagram, for example, with what it is you are continuing to look at and to watch.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we get in this loop of we're following someone, maybe, a celebrity, a public figure. I'm not talking about friends and family. I'm talking about more the allure of like the influencer.
Yeah, the influencer.
The influencer, which also think about the languaging of that, Yes. You're allowing yourself to be influenced. Yes. So if you don't like it, like take a step back.
Yeah.
Unfollow is okay. So one of the ways you can sort of transform your relationship with Instagram, and I do this all the time, and not to say that everyone I follow is completely aligned with my values. There are some people that I follow who aren't completely aligned with my values, but I still respect their perspective. So I keep them around as sort of like a touch point, like to rub up against, like, is this a yes or a no for me? Because sometimes that's helpful for my own psychological process. But in the manifestation process, there are individuals called expanders, which are the people that you're actually meant to follow, because there's something about them, maybe not them in their totality, but some sort of value that they have that you resonate with. And so you just want to be really mindful about, especially now, but always with social media and with what objects you choose to bring into your home, what you're putting on your body. I mean, all of these are indicating to you and to others what it is you value. I know for me, I would say right now, if I went to the mall, there wouldn't be almost anything there that I would want to put on my body. And it can be a really sort of lonely place when you aren't really finding a lot that resonates with you in the world, whether it's clothing or people or politics or ideas. But that's where there's that real invitation. When you find that there's a void, you get to decide what you want to put in the void. And that's really where creation comes from.
Yes. Wow.
Is being honest enough to say, I don't like anything that exists. Or nothing here actually is what I value at all. So then you create it and you become maybe an expander for other people.
I really feel like we're coming to this point, and it's interesting that we're having all these transits right before this point, but next week is when Pluto and the sun move into Aquarius. And when you talk about the individuation process, I think of course, Aries, because Aries is the sign that represents like, who am I? This is who I am. But Aquarius is, who am I within the construct of society, of the community, the village, social media. Like, who am I in terms of the person that I am in social media? I find that like the people that I see that tend to have the most followers, they have a very clear identity.
They do.
Very clear identity. It's easy to follow them because it's easy to see what you're going to get from their account.
There's a level of predictability.
Yes. And so when we're looking at all these transits happening this week, Mercury in Sagittarius, squaring Neptune in Pisces, having that honest conversation with yourself, maybe a difficult conversation with yourself, and then the sun in Capricorn aligning with Uranus in Taurus. Values, revolution of values. What are my values? How are these values creating the foundation for what I'm ascending to achieve? Mars in Capricorn aligning with Saturn in Pisces. Again, that inner world, that Pisces energy. Saturn having the courage to go within yourself and to be compassionate and empathetic in your inner world. Venus in Sagittarius aligning with Chiron in Aries, facing your fears in your close personal relationships and with regard to your senses, because Venus is the planet of the senses, self-worth and values. So being honest about what you value. I like this. What I like is not necessarily popular, but that's okay. That's really how we're going to elevate to the highest frequency of Aquarius, is if people just start being themselves. And you being you might not be the most popular version of you on the block, but eventually it's going to shake up the world and you're going to find the right people, the right people that maybe they don't even like what you like, but they like you because they know what they are getting. Even like you were saying with some of these Instagram accounts that they're not really in alignment with your views, but they kind of challenge you in a way.
Yes. And I think what I appreciate about them is that they do know what they think.
Yes. You're clear
they're
about
authentic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're clear about what they represent. And you may not really like what they represent all the time, but you like that they're clear about what they represent.
And it's just more interesting to me than following people who are all the same.
It's like they say the echo chamber, where you're in
Yes.
the echo chamber where everyone's
resharing the same things all the time. It makes the world feel very small to me.
Exactly. Like I like listening to people on the left and the right when it comes to politics.
I do too.
Because it's more interesting that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that like when I'm talking to people that have left points of views, I tend to be more giving them a perspective of the right. And when I'm talking to somebody who's more on the right end of the spectrum, I'm giving more the perspective of the left. So,
well, that's your Venus in Libra.
Yeah.
You're like,
yes.
I have to balance out this conversation.
Exactly.
In some way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's funny because like my Republican friends think I'm a liberal Democrat. And my liberal Democrat friends think I'm a right-wing Republican.
Well, that also just makes you a good Scorpio. No one knows what the hell's going on.
Exactly.
for Scott.
Exactly.
You transform with every conversation.
Yes. And so this week kind of culminates with the final transit where Mercury transits into Capricorn, where it was prior to the retrograde. During the beginning of the retrograde, Mercury was in Capricorn. Mercury was in Capricorn the first 8 degrees from December 1st to the 22nd. But now from January 13th to February 4th, it's going to transit all the way through Capricorn. And so this is building us to that position where we can speak from authority, that this is who I am. Love it, leave it, don't like it, whatever your opinions are. This is just who I am. And I'm going to be confident in speaking from that place of authority. I'm going to take responsibility for my beliefs, my perspective. Everything this week is building to this point, which is going to carry us through into February. And this is where Mercury is going to be when the Sun and Pluto transit into Aquarius. So what better place for Mercury to be than in Capricorn when the Sun and Pluto are transiting into Aquarius? Because as the Sun and Pluto, the planet of vitality and the planet of transformation, transit into the sign of community and independence and innovation, you want to be able to speak from that place of authority. When I'm addressing the group, I want to be able to speak from that place of authority, that this is how I perceive things. And other people can agree or disagree with me, and that's fine. But we are going to be clear about where we're coming from.
I just want to add one part to that. As someone with a North Node in Aries, I feel a little like I need to clarify. Like when you're talking about speak from authority, speak from the perspective of who you are. I guess I want to add the word today. Like, who are you today?
Exactly.
Because I think that committing, and maybe this is just because of my personal astrology, but committing to who you are sort of in totality feels really big. Because we know that we're here in this human experience to change and evolve. So from that perspective, who we are is also changing and evolving. And so there might be a tendency to wait around to figure out who you are, like until you're 110% sure of who you are before you start speaking from that place. But that might not ever arrive.
It's never going to get there.
that experience of its perfectionism,
yes,
is what it is, which is a total trap in and of itself. But who are you today? Who are you in this moment? And be as authentic as you are in that moment. I think that's the languaging that maybe works for me, that makes it feel more like bite-sized pieces instead of like trying to eat a whole pizza in one bite or something.
You're not making a lifetime commitment here. I think you make a great point, because just as the earth is turning and we're getting older, we're going to continue to evolve. So who you are today is different than who you were yesterday, last year, 10 years ago, different than who you'll be in another 10 years. Life is a work in progress, and there is no perfection. But at the same time, you have to really think of yourself as being perfect in every moment. I mean, I encourage anyone who feels like they're a perfectionist to find the perfection in every moment. And the perfection in every moment is that your experience is what it is meant to be. And whether you deem that as good, bad, ugly, painful, joyful, blissful, it's the perfect experience for you and what your soul needs. And especially for those of you that were born with the North Node in Aries, like these late 1986ers, the fall of 1986, this North Node squaring the new moon in Capricorn is squaring your North Node. And the North Node is conjunct your North Node. So it's like if you were born in the fall of 1986, you're being hit really hard with this new moon in Capricorn, where it's like you have to take responsibility for who you are. Even if you don't like who you are in this moment, it's like, well, I don't want to say who I am right now because I'm not who I really want to be. Doesn't matter. Who are you right now? That's what's important to acknowledge.
What helps me connect with authenticity is to acknowledge all of the different parts of myself. So we've talked about this on and off, but the fact that we have contradictions within ourselves all the time represented in our astrological chart, but even day to day, I think we can all feel them. You can feel happy and sad at the same time. Death is an ending and a beginning.
Yes.
So recognizing and accepting all of the different parts, I think, helps with authenticity, because then you don't have to try to just be one thing, because no one is just one thing. And you talk about these influencers who have this really strong, personality, this really cohesive, consistent personality, but that's actually branding. That's not really people. I mean, some people are more consistent than others depending on their astrology, but part of that is just an illusion, the illusion of consistency.
Absolutely.
Because that's how we're oriented. We want to go buy tomato sauce at the store and it's in the same jar. It has the same label. That's branding.
Yes.
And that's different than people.
Well, think about celebrities. When you think about the whole influencer is like this subculture of celebrities.
Absolutely.
It didn't exist before social media. Back in the 80s, 90s, you had to be a famous rock star, movie star, TV star, or whatever. That's how you were known. And now there's this whole other group of people that are not famous entertainers. They are just famous because they're on social media and they have a brand that's somehow caught fire and has attracted an audience. I've spent time with celebrities.
That's true. You have.
They are not on one hand, they are exactly who you think they are, but then there's the other side of them that you never see.
Well, there are all of the parts that they're not showing you.
Exactly. And so you see this person on social media and you think they're a certain way, and they are. But you're getting...
That's just part of who they are.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. It's not the whole picture. And so what we're talking about here is the whole picture of you, accepting the whole picture of who you are. The parts that you like and don't like.
And the parts that don't seem like they go together. The contradictions.
Totally. Yes. It's one of the things that will often say in readings to new clients is I'm going to say something about you, and then later on I'm probably going to say something about you that's going to contradict exactly what I said
just said.
earlier.
Yeah.
But that's the
that.
nature of your astrological code.
Mm-hmm.
You are, it's like that song. We're walking contradictions, part truth, part fiction, something like that. You'll know that song?
It sounds
Chris
familiar.
Christopherson, I think, wrote that. Yeah. Part truth, part fiction. I mean, we're complex.
Mm-hmm.
We are complex individuals.
I would say all of our parts are truth, though.
Exactly.
I don't like that fiction part.
Yeah, exactly.
It's about learning to hold multiple things as true.
Yeah. Yes.
That's the work.
Yes. And that's the challenge moving forward this week.
Okay.
All right.
Good luck out there.
Good luck.
And good luck to us.
Yes. We'll need it.
Okay, so we're just going to do one question for today. Justin asks, love your new format and branding. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Justin.
Can you talk about the 13th zodiac, Ophiuchus, and potentially respond to this new discovery and its implications for the world?
Thank you for the question, Justin. Well, first of all, Ophiuchus is not a new discovery. It is the 13th constellation. It's something that has been known since the ancient Babylonians.
It kind of pops up every once in a while, though, as sort of a
it's one of
claiming
these
to be a new discovery.
Right.
It seems.
It's odd to me, and I don't know why it keeps coming up as like this new discovery, because it doesn't make sense. It's not a new discovery. It's confusing to me because it's been known about since all the other constellations were known about. But I think that, I don't know, maybe this is just like my negative frame of mind that thinks that, like, I saw this, a client sent me a reel on Instagram about this astrophysicist on the NPR channel. You know, it's like, oh, this woman's an astrophysicist. It's NPR. Like, so this is, you know, this is the truth.
It must be true.
This is the truth, right? And she is saying that, did you know that you're not really the sign that you are? Like,
I saw this video. People were ripping it up in the comments.
Yeah.
They were unhappy.
I almost kind of feel bad for this person having this, like, even making this video, because she doesn't sound intelligent. I mean, she sounds intelligent, but if you know what she's talking about, she doesn't sound intelligent because she clearly doesn't understand how Western astrology works. There is no 13th sign with Western astrology. There's 12 signs, and the signs don't even line up perfectly to the constellations. So, like, if you look at one of these apps that say, like, star maps, and, you know, you put the phone up there and you can see, oh, there's, you know, this planet, there's Jupiter. Wait, Jupiter is not in Taurus. Scott keeps talking about Jupiter being in Taurus, but this says that Jupiter is in Aries. What Scott or any other Western astrologer is talking about must not be real, because this app is showing the planet in a different sign than what I'm hearing about from this astrologer. But Western astrology doesn't base the location of the planets and the signs on the stars. It does it by the equinoxes.
Interesting.
So when the sun transits on the spring equinox and the fall equinox, the spring equinox is when the days start becoming longer than the nights. And the fall equinox is when the nights start becoming longer than the days in the northern hemisphere. It's on that day during the spring equinox that Western astrology deems that the sun transits into Aries.
Hmm.
Now, if you look at the star map, it doesn't say that. So you think that, oh, this is wrong.
But it's really about like where you're standing and what your perspective is. Looking at everything from the perspective of the stars, it looks one way. If you're looking at everything from the perspective of the equinox,
it's a different way.
it's a different way.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
literally like you're standing in that corner of the room and then you go and stand over there. It looks different. It's a different perspective.
Exactly.
Of the same data.
Exactly.
So from the perspective of Western astrology, Ophiuchus is not a threat to the way we understand.
It's not a part of Western astrology, and it's not a threat to how you interpret a chart. It's always been there, but it's never been a part of the zodiac belt.
Because it's located outside of the belt, right?
It's not included in the belt. So like if you're like the belt is like where the planets are transiting through. Like you see the planets as they cross over the sky, they're in alignment. Mm-hmm. They're all, it's not like, Mars is over here and the moon's way over here. They're in alignment with each other. They're on the same road.
Right.
In that road, from the star map view, Ophiuchus is a part of that road. But from the Western astrology perspective, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It's there in the star map reality, but in Western astrology, it's ignored. These constellations are not all the same size. Some are much larger than others.
Right.
But in Western astrology, they're all 30 degrees. So the constellations are, in essence, if you're comparing what the astrophysicist is talking about to Western astrology, these constellations are not in the right alignment to Western astrology. But it doesn't matter because Western astrology is based on the equinoxes.
Right.
Like they talk about the precession. The precession is, it's like I often say to people that, the next time the planets and stars will be aligned in the way that they are aligned when you were born is over 25,000 years from the date, time, and place of your birth. So this astrophysicist talks about the precession and how there's like this wobble of the Earth and like the polar ice caps like shifting,
Mm-hmm.
as we move, like there's this big debate. Are we still in the age of Pisces or are we in the age of Aquarius? It's like the age, the zodiacal age is, the zodiacal year is 25,000 years, over 25,000 years. It's over 2,000 years that we are in the age of a sign. What this astrophysicist was saying is that Western astrology does not take that into account, which is not true.
But Western astrologers know that already.
They do take it into account, and they take it into account in that the way that it works is on the equinox is the first day of spring, first day of Aries, or fall equinox is the first day of Libra. And so it doesn't matter how we've moved in relation to all the stars. Western astrology is based on the equinoxes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the energy.
This kind of reminds me, as you're kind of going through this debate a little bit, it's kind of like trying to decide which of two different religions is correct.
It's really silly to me. I agree.
It's sort of, I think it's a great question. Thanks, Justin, for bringing this in, because it's interesting to consider, like how we really have this desire for like something to be right and then something else to be wrong.
Yes.
But it's what we've been talking about this whole episode, which is about contradictions. Both are true. Mm-hmm. It depends where you're standing, your perspective, what you're looking at. But I think of it as sort of like they're two different languages, maybe. You refer to astrology as a language. Mm-hmm. It's like saying that Spanish is better than English.
Exactly. It's really silly. It's like, I've done thousands of readings for people, And I don't think anyone's ever said, this doesn't sound like me. Everyone's always like, wow, this is me to a T. How do you know more about me than even my best friend knows? I guess I'm psychic, if this is not real. But the way I see it is I'm reading the chart. I'm looking at these symbols. This is a time-tested discipline of interpreting the energies of the planets and the astral energies, all of it, and how it affects us. And it's like I heard, this was really funny. This was a few years ago. I was looking up Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is like a famous astrophysicist, scientist, space guy. And he was going off on astrology. And he said, I know astrology is not real because, let me give you an example. He said, he's like, I was in front of a crowd of, hundreds of people, and I read a horoscope. And I said, how many of you feel like this sounds like you? And he said over half the people raised their hands. And I said, okay, well, yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, if you ever read a horoscope, more than one might sound like you, because they are writing these they're very broad.
Well, horoscopes are based off your sun sign.
Your sun
only.
Sign, but
so more general.
But if you're reading your rising sign too, it might sound more like you, because the way that they do the horoscopes off the sun sign is they actually tip the chart so like if you're reading for Capricorn, it would actually be, you're looking at the Capricorn rising sign. And you see the planets move through the houses. And that's how it's telling you that at this time of year, you're going to, it's about relationships. At this time of year, it's about career, and so on and so forth. And then he also maybe brought up something about Ophiuchus, I think.
Interesting.
And I was like, wow, this was kind of early on in my education of astrology, and it really kind of shook me. Like, I was like, oh my, all this stuff that I'm reading about myself that it resonates with me so deeply. Now, all of a sudden, I had a lot of doubts. But what's funny is I looked at him and I said, I saw two signs in his face. I saw Libra and Cancer. I was like, he's either a Libra sun or a Cancer sun, and the other one's the moon. And I went and looked up his birth date.
Which square each other, by the way.
And I looked at where the planets were when he was born. And I looked him up. And he's a Libra sun with a Cancer moon. And I was like, well, if astrology isn't real,
then how did you know that?
Then how did I guess that? And so astrology is one of those things that has been threatened by religion. And now the new religion is science. If you don't believe in science, then there's something wrong with you. Which is so funny to me, because science is always changing. Because you have a new discovery.
As it should.
You have a new discovery, and you realize that what you thought was the thing was not the thing.
It's like we were talking about with identity. Your identity is always changing. If it's not, then you're lying to yourself.
And in order to draw out an astrological code, you need to work with mathematical equations. It's not like some made up thing. Like, you have to know how to do the math. Now it's easy because you just put it into the computer program and it does it for you. But there is a science and there's math. There's a science behind astrology, and there's a math element to astrology. It's not some made up woo-woo thing. So
this question brings up a lot for you.
It does. It
does.
Know. Religion is threatened by astrology. Science is threatened by astrology. And astrology is not threatened by either of them. Astrology endures. And
I just think of it as like astrology is one of the rooms in a house.
Exactly.
And if you're not into it, don't go into
then
that
don't
room.
go in there. You
But
don't have to go in.
It doesn't mean you have to like bring a wrecking ball
Right.
and take out that part of the house.
Exactly. It's so strange.
It's interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Justin, for that question.
Interesting things to think about.
Yes. And thank you, Gabriella.
Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome. And thank you to all of our listeners.
Thanks for being here.
Yes. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Weekly Transit. If you're curious to learn how these transits or any others may be affecting you, or if you're interested in learning more about your astrological code, contact me for a reading at theweeklytransit.com. If you're interested in delving into the world of psychotherapy with Gabriella, you can contact her at innervisionpsychotherapy.com. This episode was produced by me, Scott Tajarian. Music written by Ben Lineback. From Listen Deep by Amber Herzog Lyman. Wishing you all the best as you ride the planetary waves.